You tell yourself you're lazy, that you're undisciplined, that you just don't want it badly enough. But deep down, something feels off with that explanation. Because it's not like you're doing nothing. Your mind is always running, scrolling, switching, reacting. You jump from one task to another, from one dopamine hit to the next. Your body might be still, but your nervous system's in overdrive. So why does it still feel like you're failing? The truth? You're not lazy. You're overstimulated. Your environment has overloaded your attention, and your motivation didn't disappear. It just drowned. In a world filled with noise, distraction is the new default. You don't wake up and consciously choose to be unfocused. You're pulled into it. You open your phone and the world starts flooding in, texts, news, images, comparisons, alerts. You don't even get to hear your own thoughts before someone else's agenda hijacks your focus. Viktor Frankl once said that when a man can't find meaning, he distracts himself with pleasure. That line cuts deep in the age of infinite entertainment. We mistake stimulation for energy. We think if something's happening on the screen, we're not wasting time. But there's a difference between movement and momentum. One drains you, the other builds you, and most of us are stuck in the loop of the first. We live in a dopamine-saturated culture. The platforms we use are engineered for compulsion. The more fragmented your attention becomes, the harder it is to feel grounded, to think deeply, to act with direction. Over time, this leads to a paradox. You're constantly doing, yet feel like you're getting nowhere. And that's where the shame creeps in. You look at yourself and think, why can't I focus like I used to? Why does everything feel so hard? But it's not because you're broken. It's because your brain is responding to an unnatural level of input. This isn't weakness. It's neurological survival. Your system wasn't built for this much stimulus, especially not without meaning behind it. Frankl believed that man's primary drive isn't pleasure, but purpose. Without purpose, pleasure becomes toxic, not because it's bad in itself, but because it's a substitute. It fills space, but not your soul. So here's the reframe. You're not unmotivated. You're detached from meaning. And meaning doesn't scream. It whispers. It doesn't arrive through a notification or a trending clip. It comes in silence, in stillness, in boredom, in the long, slow return to what actually matters to you. But when you're overstimulated, silence feels like suffering. Stillness feels like failure. You panic when there's nothing grabbing your attention because you've forgotten how to be with yourself. That's not a character flaw. It's a side effect of conditioning. And the longer you stay in that loop, the more dangerous it gets. Because eventually, even the things you used to care about start to lose their color. Your passions, your goals, your relationships, they all start to feel flat. You think you're burning out. But it's not just exhaustion, it's disconnection. Frankl saw this coming. He warned that modern man suffers not from too little, but from too much. Too many options, too much noise, too little meaning. We're drowning in data and starving for depth. And until you cut the stimulation and reconnect to something real, no amount of productivity hacks will save you. You don't need another routine. You need a reason. There's a hidden cost to constant input, one that most people never calculate. It's not just your time you're losing. It's your clarity, your intuition, your ability to think deeply. Because the more you consume, the less space you leave for your own mind to speak. You scroll because it's easy, because it gives you just enough stimulation to avoid discomfort. But that escape comes with a price. It erodes your inner compass. Your thoughts start sounding like everyone else's. Your opinions are no longer yours. You've downloaded them from 100 strangers. And without realizing it, you lose the thread of your own life. Viktor Frankl warned us that meaning doesn't come from external stimulation. It comes from wrestling with your inner world, with the tension between who you are and who you could become. But when every uncomfortable thought is silenced by a scroll, that growth never begins. You might think, but I need a break. Life is hard. I'm tired. Of course, we all need relief. But relief isn't the same as recovery. Scrolling is relief, meaning is recovery. One numbs the wound, the other helps it heal. And that's the core trap of overstimulation. It gives the illusion of rest without restoration. You lay in bed for hours scrolling. You tell yourself you're relaxing, but you wake up more tired than before, mentally fragmented, emotionally drained. Because your brain never got to process. It never got to reset. It just kept reacting. We've confused reaction with engagement. But deep thinkers know engagement takes presence. Presence takes effort. And effort requires energy. If your energy is spent on infinite micro-reactions, you'll never have enough left for anything meaningful. Frankl said, "When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves." Today, the challenge isn't physical survival. It's psychological sovereignty, the ability to reclaim your mind from an environment designed to exploit it. Most people will never attempt this, because reclaiming your mind means being bored. It means sitting in silence long enough to hear the discomfort. It means choosing depth when the world rewards distraction. But here's what they don't tell you, that boredom is sacred. Silence is not empty. It's full of answers. It's where ideas come from, where alignment returns, where your true voice gets louder than the noise. You won't find meaning on a timeline. You won't rediscover purpose through a recommended video. These things come from a place technology can't reach. They emerge when you stop feeding your brain junk and let it digest something real. Frankl believed that suffering without meaning destroys the soul, but suffering with meaning can transform it. If you're overstimulated, it's a form of suffering, but it's not meaningless. It's a wake-up call. It's your psyche saying, "You weren't meant for this pace. You're starving for stillness." And here's the truth most people can't face. If you want to feel motivated again, you have to get bored first. You have to unplug. Not for hours, for days. For long enough that your brain starts remembering how to think, not just react. And when that happens, something strange emerges. Old ideas return, new insights appear. A sense of direction, faint at first, begins to form. You remember what you actually care about. Not because someone told you, but because it came from within. You don't need to escape the world, but you do need to stop letting it own your attention. Until you do, you'll keep confusing numbness for peace, stimulation for passion, and noise for connection. Motivation doesn't come from hype. It comes from clarity, and clarity only lives in silence. There comes a moment when you realize the thoughts inside your head aren't even yours anymore. They're echoes, borrowed from headlines, captions, influencers, algorithms. You think you're thinking, but you're just rehearsing scripts you've absorbed without question. Viktor Frankl believed that the essence of being human is our capacity to choose how we respond to life. But how can you choose anything freely when your attention is constantly hijacked? When your mind is flooded before you even get a chance to reflect? This is the quiet crisis no one wants to talk about, the death of the inner world. You were born with imagination, curiosity, and depth. But in an overstimulated culture, those traits are liabilities. Depth slows you down. Curiosity takes effort. Imagination requires space. And we've traded all of that for speed, convenience, and endless noise. So now, we're adults who panic when left alone with our thoughts. We open apps before we open our eyes. We can't walk from one room to another without reaching for a distraction. Silence feels like a threat, not a sanctuary. And yet, everything meaningful requires space. Creativity needs it. Self-awareness depends on it. Healing demands it. Without stillness, you can't hear the quiet truths trying to guide you. But overstimulation drowns them out. It makes you chase novelty instead of meaning, approval instead of alignment. And then you wonder why you feel off, why your energy feels scattered, why everything feels urgent but nothing feels real. Frankl said, "Life is never made unbearable by circumstances, but only by lack of meaning and purpose." And that's the paradox. We are more stimulated than ever, but more disoriented than ever too, because we've forgotten where meaning comes from. It doesn't come from what you consume, it comes from what you confront. And that confrontation doesn't happen when you're reacting all day. It happens when you're still long enough to meet yourself, to face the questions you've been avoiding. Who am I really? What do I want? What do I actually believe? Most people never ask these questions, not because they don't care, but because they don't pause long enough to feel the discomfort of not knowing. So they fill the space with noise and convince themselves that being busy is being alive. But busyness is not aliveness. It's anesthesia. And the cost is your connection to your own life. You see, motivation is not some mysterious force that visits randomly. It's the natural result of clarity. And clarity only appears when the fog of constant input finally lifts. If you feel unmotivated, it's not because you're lazy. It's because your inner world has become foreign to you. It's cluttered with content, drained by distractions, buried beneath an avalanche of dopamine hits. But here's the good news. The antidote isn't complex. You don't need a new hack or habit stack. You need silence, stillness, time without input. Frankl taught that meaning can survive even in the darkest places, that the soul can endure anything if it has purpose. But purpose doesn't shout, it whispers, and you'll never hear it until you make space for it. You want to feel motivated again? Then you need to feel bored. Not the surface-level boredom that comes from waiting in line. The deep boredom that comes when you stop running, stop reacting, and let your nervous system slow down. That's when the real questions return. That's when the fog clears. That's when your direction begins to reappear. And that's the turning point, when you stop chasing constant stimulation and start pursuing deep meaning. Most people today confuse freedom with access. The more you can scroll, binge, click, the more freedom you think you have. But Viktor Frankl didn't define freedom as the ability to do anything. He defined it as the power to choose who you become in response to life. Real freedom is not endless stimulation. Real freedom is discipline. And that's not a popular message in a world addicted to comfort. We're told we should always feel good, that if something's hard or uncomfortable, it must be wrong. But this belief system makes you fragile. It makes you chase feeling better instead of becoming stronger. And so, when you feel unmotivated, you reach for relief, not meaning. You scroll instead of sitting with discomfort. You distract instead of asking the hard question. You avoid instead of choosing growth. But Frankl believed growth happens in the gap between stimulus and response. That tiny space between what happens and how you react is where transformation begins. The more you fill that space with input, the less you develop your selfhood. The more you numb, the more you forget you even had a choice. You end up reacting to life instead of responding to it. And there's a difference. Reaction is unconscious. It's survival-based. It's fast, automatic, and often fear-driven. Response is conscious. It's intentional. It requires awareness and reflection. And it almost always takes more time. But our current culture doesn't reward response. It rewards speed, virality, snap decisions. And the result? People who are overloaded with data, yet empty of direction. People who confuse opinions with wisdom. Who feel burned out not because they're weak, but because they've never been taught how to manage their energy. Overstimulation isn't just a tech issue, it's a spiritual one. It's the erosion of your ability to be with yourself without running. And that's why meaning feels so distant, because you can't manufacture it, you have to encounter it. And encounters don't happen in rush, they happen in reverence. Frankl's most powerful insight wasn't about suffering, it was about choice. That no matter what happens to you, you always retain one freedom. The freedom to decide what it means. And meaning, not pleasure, is what actually sustains the soul. So when your life feels dry or flat or heavy, the answer isn't more stimulus, it's more silence. Not more doing, but deeper being. And that shift is terrifying for most people, because when the noise stops, the the real voice starts speaking, the one inside you, the one you've ignored for years, the one that isn't impressed by dopamine or attention, but only wants truth. And truth is rarely convenient. But that's where liberation begins, when you stop trying to escape discomfort and start asking what it's pointing to. When you realize your anxiety is not a sign you're broken, but a message that your life is misaligned, that your attention is scattered, that your soul is suffocating beneath distractions. Frankl didn't offer easy answers. He didn't hand out quick fixes. He invited people into the fire of transformation. He showed that meaning is forged in responsibility. That purpose doesn't arise from ease, but from wrestling with life's deepest questions and refusing to look away. If you want to stop feeling unmotivated, stop chasing things that keep you distracted. Begin removing the noise. Begin noticing your thoughts. Begin practicing restraint. Because motivation doesn't grow in overstimulation. It grows in focus, in simplicity, in silence, in the raw confrontation with what really matters. And that path, it's not popular, but it's powerful. It's easy to look at your life and assume you're lazy, that there's something wrong with you, that if you just had more discipline, more drive, more willpower, you'd finally become the person you're supposed to be. But laziness is rarely the root issue. What you're experiencing is something deeper, quieter, and more dangerous: spiritual malnutrition. You're not starving for productivity. You're starving for purpose. You don't need another 5-step system to get more done. You need a reason to do any of it in the first place. Frankl saw this clearly. He knew that when a person lacks meaning, even the smallest burdens feel unbearable. But when someone finds meaning, they can endure almost anything. That's not just philosophy, it's survival. So when you feel numb, drained, or lost, don't start by trying to force motivation. Start by asking, what am I truly living for? What principle, what value, what mission anchors my life when everything else falls apart? If the answer is just money, approval, comfort, or achievement, it won't be enough. Those are temporary highs. They'll never nourish your soul. Meaning isn't something you chase. It's something you create by how you show up, by how you love, by how you choose to carry the weight of your own existence with dignity instead of distraction. And here's the paradox. The more you chase comfort, the more discomfort you'll feel. But the more you pursue purpose, the more grounded you become, even in chaos. We were never designed to live in a constant feed of input. You weren't built to carry the pain of the whole world in your pocket. You weren't meant to compare your life with thousands of strangers before breakfast. And you definitely weren't made to suppress your inner voice just to stay caught up. If you've lost your sense of motivation, it's not because you're weak. It's because your internal compass has been jammed by noise. You're no longer steering. You're drifting. But here's the truth. You can take the wheel back. It won't happen by doing more. It will happen by subtracting, by saying no, by reclaiming the mental and emotional space that overstimulation has stolen. You need stillness, not as a luxury, but as a necessity. Because in that stillness, something strange and ancient begins to happen. The questions return. The hunger for meaning reawakens. And you realize you were never lazy. You were overwhelmed. You were never broken. You were buried. Frankl believed that the ultimate freedom was not doing what you want, but choosing who you become in every moment, in every decision, especially the ones no one sees. So don't wait for motivation to strike. Build a life that summons it. Create a daily rhythm that nourishes your soul instead of exhausting your system. Read fewer opinions. Feel your own life. Write your own code. Stop asking how to stay busy. Start asking what's worth being busy for. Because in the end, overstimulation steals your ability to feel. It turns life into static. And unless you take the radical step of tuning back into your own frequency, you'll spend your entire existence on autopilot. exhausted, reactive, and wondering why nothing feels real anymore. But that's not your fate. Not if you choose something else. Not if you stop numbing and start noticing. Not if you give up the shallow highs and trade them for deep alignment. Not if you make space for meaning to re-enter your life. The world doesn't need another hyper-productive, over-informed, burned-out human. It needs someone awake,